Hello, I'm Andrew, and this is my final project for the Human Factors in AI course offered by Duke University. The task analysis. So I'm going to build an app that helps teach people Mandarin Chinese, and I'm going to use machine learning to help optimize this training. The user can be pretty much anyone, someone who knows no Mandarin Chinese, or someone who is near native understanding and just wants to improve their language skills. The task or the end goal is to help that person achieve their language learning goals. So this could range from learning basic pinyin to being conversational to learning more technical vocabulary to help with their job, etc., etc. How machine learning can help with this is that it can use modeling to optimize the lesson plan to help this person achieve their language goal. Here's an example of the app. It should be pretty much similar to something like Duolingo or Babbel or any of the other language learning apps out there. The task analysis flow diagram. So we start with the objective, which is the user hits their desired language goal, and then we start our way backwards. The user signs up to the app, and in between, there are multiple iterations of the user undergoing some language learning lessons, and then there'll be some tests to assess that person's skill level. And I'll use the HSK standard to assess that. So basically, if the person passes the test, they can advance to the next level and they'll keep repeating until they hit their desired language goal. And where machine learning can help is that it can optimize the person's lesson plan depending on their current skills and their current strengths and weaknesses. So the UX design for this app, so every user would be presented with a questionnaire to explain their language goal. And based on that, we'll use machine learning to determine which HSK level they want to achieve, and so on and so forth. So the questionnaire will have questions like, do you want to be able to text your friends in Mandarin Chinese? That means the person would need to have a pretty good grasp on pinyin. If you want to be conversational in a supermarket, then that would be something like HSK3, etc., etc. Then to address the code start problem, the user would be presented a sample test with the various different aspects of Mandarin Chinese to assess their current language level. And based on the results of that test, the user would be given a optimized lesson plan, followed by a series of tests to assess their skill level. If the user cannot advance, then they'll have to repeat the lessons at the current HSK level, but the lesson plan would be modified to help the person improve on their weaknesses. If the person advances, then they'll be presented with the lesson plan for the next HSK level, but the lesson plan would still be catered towards the person's language goals and their skill level. And we'll keep repeating until the person reaches their goal. And once they are done, if there are other if there's a higher HSK level that the person can still achieve, then we would recommend further lessons if the person still wants to continue to learn. A few notes on the UX design. The original questionnaire and test would address the code start problem. To address transparency, the app would communicate the results of the test, citing the questions that the person did well on and the questions that they did poorly on to explain how they were assessed and what their current HSK level is. To address uncertainty, the app wouldn't present, the app wouldn't say specifically they'll pass a certain HSK level exam or not. They'll say that the user is a certain percentage likely to pass that HSK exam. And this app uses implicit feedback loops to adapt the user's lesson plan to optimize their language learning. Some privacy concerns. In terms of the data collected, there will be some privately identified information such as the user's name, email, and hopefully we'll be able to charge money for this app, so there'll be payment information. We would also like to know the user's country of origin just for us to sample who is actually using this app, and this would be considered indirectly identifiable PII. For the speaking portions of the app, we would be collecting speech and voice recognition data. And of course, the app would be tracking the user's language learning progress. In terms of fair use, we must inform the users of the data that's being collected. We must allow the users to give consent to opt in and out of providing such a data. We must inform the users of how the data would be used, specifically how the voice recordings would be used to assess their speaking ability. We must give users access to their data, i.e. their user profile. We must give users access to our privacy policy document to explain how we're going to use their data. We will only collect the data that is stated as per our user privacy policy, and we will use all safeguards to protect this data and to delete it as soon as it is applicable. In terms of the laws that we must follow, since this app would likely be used in the EU, we are subject to GDPR. This is educational software, so there should be at least some parts of FERPA that we must apply. And since we'll be collecting credit card information, the GLBA or PCI and other financial privacy regulations apply. Because of these rules, we must adhere to the obligations of data collectors and the rights of the individuals as stated by the GDPR. For children who use this app, we must have parents give consent for us to use and collect this data. The HSK and educational training data should only be disclosed to the user as per FERPA. We must adhere to the GLBA and other financial policy obligations when it comes to the credit card data. And to protect the user's training information, we would use federated learning, so most of the models would be on the phone itself, and differential privacy to maintain the privacy of the individual data. Now for some ethical considerations. This probably wouldn't apply that much, but we should still look out for representational bias when we create the models to assess the user's language ability compared to other users in the system. And while we do that, we need to be careful of sexism, racism, and other forms of discrimination. We should look out for measurement bias. So while we'll be using the user's test results as the basis of our predictions, we must also be mindful of how our current tests are limited in terms of how we decide the next lesson plan. So we shouldn't 100% base all of our information based on the features we used in the model. There's definite risk of learning bias, so we must be careful when evaluating how the model weighs the test results when assessing the user's language ability. Given that we're using federated learning, we must look out for underrepresented attributes in our model, since we'll be likely using simpler models whenever we can. Deployment bias, so we have to be careful that our beta users and our training data represents our real users, and we need to retrain the model as necessary. And this model will be subject to feedback loop bias, and we really need to look out for that since we'll be iterating across multiple tests and multiple lessons plans. So even though we will be weighting the user's lessons plan based on their past test results, we must still program the app so that the user would receive training in all aspects of Mandarin Chinese, not just the specific parts of the lessons that they need improvement on. In terms of fairness, accountability, and transparency, this app should prioritize individual fairness, meaning users who perform similarly on these tests should receive similar lessons plans, regardless of their regional demographic. In terms of accountability, we must adhere to the laws and the FIPS previously stated, with regular model audits and human evaluation. For transparency, we will explain the feature importance of a model. So we'll explain how the person is being tested and how the app evaluates the user in terms of building future lessons plans. And to mitigate against these risks, we would employ an ethical checklist, particularly in terms of the team that we would assemble to build this app so that it reflects the racial and national diversity of the users. Thank you very much for listening and have a good day.